Hello everyone, welcome back to Meatballcraft. This is episode 17. In today's episode, we're going to make a ton of progress and things are going to go quite fast, but hopefully I explain everything is a bit more complicated and the episode might be a little bit longer. Thank you for watching, I hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so today we start looking at the Mythic assembler. We realize that is quite out of our pay grade. Needs some Mythmanite though, so we do queue up like 1,000 ingots just because we can. We have the resources for that, we might as well. And we move on to getting this stuff together for our miners. We make another ultimate package crafter, we encode all the recipes for the miner caps that we're going to need, and we also start crafting all of those. All the caps are pretty easy, we had every resource for them, and we also craft their secondary blocks too. Once again, these were not too expensive, things like blocks of insanium and such, and we craft up the actual miner controllers too. We assemble them all on our miner floor, gotta make sure that they're all facing the same direction for consistency's sake, and use our assembly stick to get them all going. Everything constructs pretty easy. This didn't actually take too long, so we got them all going, but none of them have any fluids yet. We decide for the fluids that we're going to do some stuff with compact machines, so we have to make a bunch more of these guys. Quick little setup here. I'd recommend using the copy and paste tool. We set up a new compact machine, and we decide we're going to put all of the fluid automation in these ones. Our first fluid that we're going to start off with is ethereal fabric. We'll name them all with signs, keep everything nice and organized. This should make it pretty easy to keep up with. Okay, let's get started on our ethereal fabric production. So we just need to set up a witch's altar. We give it a blessed stone so we don't have to worry about energy. That supplies these two spinning wheels with all of the power that they'll need in just a moment. Set up a honey smelter oven controller. This guy's pretty easy, and the mythical resource crucible to smelt down the ethereal fabric. We set up a pulverizer to get string here since we have white wool, but we don't actually have a lot of string in the system. Was too lazy to set that up automatically. We set up an industrial squeezer to provide honey to the honey smelter. We do this by using the colored honey drops, which actually have EMC, kind of a cheesy way to get a bunch of free honey out. We set up a villager trade exchanger to get the fiery unguent, which we're going to need for one of the recipes. This guy's pretty easy to work with. We set up the honey smelter oven to actually make ourselves some good old liquid witchcraft, and that liquid witchcraft can be mixed with 2 string to liquid witchcraft, and that spinning wheel for witch's stitching. The witch's stitching then goes in with a fiery unguent and 2 light gray wool as well, and there you go, we get our alchemist fleece. You simply pipe that into the crucible and melt it down, and that gives us our beautiful liquid ethereal fabric, which is half of what that miner needs. And with that liquid done, we can start moving on to the other ones. First things first, we set up a void seedling because we will need some of these later for one of the liquids. We set up a quantum link chamber to get our IMI system into this major compact cube, which is pretty easy. You'll use this with a bunch of little capability adapters. We name all the cubes just to preset what fluids we're going to need. Makes it a little bit easier for me to track these personally. Make sure everything's all nice and connected up and has channels, and we hop on into our chemical goo. This one is really easy and really small. We set up a capability adapter to the IMI system. We export sedenite through an interface. We do some deep blue matter into a mixer. First, we melt the sedenite, send it into the mixer with the deep blue matter. Super simple setup here. And that guy will make us alchemical goo. Fluid enricher, my bad, not a mixer. And we can move on to the seared gravestone. This guy's a little bit more involved. We set up an immersive engineering mixer for it. It's actually required. We interface in some graves dust to fill it out. We feed it dragon bones from EMC. And then we have a melter with cobblestone giving us the seared stone, and that mixes to make our seared gravestone. Pretty simple. We can move on to the milkiest chocolate. We have 1.4 million milk chocolate. We're getting this from a loot fabricator for the Tyrosaur. We use our IMI system to take out that milk chocolate that we're already making. Makes this very easy. We get our milk into a fluid transposer. We send the milk chocolate on over into a melter. Very nice. Melts this down into chocolate. We mix milk and chocolate into the milkiest chocolate in a chemical reactor. Very easy. We start work on ghostly matter, which we do see we're going to need ectoplasm for. We don't have this yet, so we go up into our normal world and test that breaking specter leaves, which have EMC, does drop ectoplasm, which is very nice. So we set up in that cube the mysterious comb from our ME interface. Very easy. We make another immersive engineering mixer for the fluid as per usual. We EMC in the glass to get the liquid glass that we need, and we set up a little auto break system to get our ectoplasm. Extremely easy and very efficient. Feed this all into the mixer, and also trash can extras to make sure it doesn't backlog. And that is all we needed to get our ghostly matter operational. And with that, we can move on to liquid life. Thankfully, the setup's a little bit easier than shooting this bat was. I kind of just, I don't know, missed somehow. It was a little tough. Set up an AME interface. We feed this with shiny scales and chrome ingots. Very easy. Set up our immersive engineering mixer. This mixer, we are going to also feed blood from our blood magic setup. Very nice, very quick. We have this all automated, and that's pretty much everything for this one already. You just have to power the mixer, and we peek on over liquid light production. Very simple, very sweet. We move on into liquid madness, which is also not too bad. It's what we needed the void seeds for that we set up earlier. Void seeds with vidium and a carbonite and power, which we're assembling here. The beautiful assembly stick. We get our IMI interface in as well. We pipe in some void seeds. These will go directly into the Empower, and then we set up a Mechanized Essentia smeltery to just melt down the Vidium crystals, but you could use any kind of smeltery. The mechanized one was just cool. I wanted to use the multi-block, although objectively, definitely not worth it. Make sure you label your stuff with a jar. It just makes life easier if you ever have to do anything weird in the future, and Magma Crucible it down into our liquid madness. Okay, next up here is Astro Water. Stay with me because this one's a little bit complicated, but it's not too bad. I'll go over it at the end. Steel Thermal Mixer. You're going to need to set this guy up. He'll actually mix the 3 fluids into the Astro Water. You're going to need 3 Magma Crucibles, 1 to melt down each kind of gem. We're going to grab 3 crafters. We need 1 to craft each kind of gem. You could probably get this done all in one, but I figured 3 just made life substantially easier to do them individually. And you also get the Sidereal Collectors in sets of 3. To make the Sidereal Collector, you're going to need these reflectors first, which need Impetus Mirrors and all of the Dynatos gems. Dynatos gems are automated, so we are going to have to manually make the Impetus Jewels, though, to make the Impetus Mirrors. Then we can order the mirrors after we make them. We just handcrafted them in bulk. Use a Thaumatorium, don't be like me. We craft up our reflectors. These are pretty easy, and then we use these to craft the Sidereal Collector. Sidereal Collectors can all go into each of the crafters, nice and quick, and we move on over to setting up a crusher. This will crush the holographic ore that we got from Rhenium, and it's going to give us what's called projector gems, which can be centrifuged. These are extremely nice, and it saves you a lot of other annoying steps on automating Illumination and Nocturnal Powder. We set up some Stardust to get pulverized, and I'll let me in the present at the time take it away. So, this guy's going to make the extra powders that we need. The powders are going to go through, that'll be fine. This guy's going to make the Star Metal Dust that we need. This guy is providing the Resonating Gems, which are passive. So, Resonating Gems, Nocturnal Powder covered. Illumination Powder, Resonating Gem covered. Stardust, Resonating Gem covered. The Sidereal Collectors don't need anything. That is all fine. These guys are going to go into 3 Magma Crucibles. They're going to get provided into the Steel Thermal Mixer. The Steel Thermal Mixer is going to mix them into just straight up Astral Water with no additional input other than power. Yes. And thankfully, after our little demo here, we do see that adding power to everything does start the Steel Thermal Mixer, and there's our beautiful Astral Water coming out. After that, we decided to move on to Cosmic Matter, which is actually going to take a lot of stuff that's not inside the compact machine to start off with. First, we breed up some bone chickens because I decide that I want bone meal produced without having to set up another mob farm accessible for it, and we also set up a quantum link on one of our empty floors with our magic stuff so that we can get some rhenium ore in there. We process the rhenium ore into ingots using a beautiful redstone furnace with flux anodizers and drop that into a mana pool that's fed infinite mana so that we can get the rhenium catalyst. This is so that we can make our Eden gem automatically with a fusion injection setup, which we just fill with catalyst, and we feed the core of it a nether star. Make sure you power all of your system, give it a redstone signal, and there you go. That is your Eden stars fully automated, because these guys are going to need to be fed into this spatial crucible for every little bit of the cosmic matter. Thankfully, that wasn't too bad. We also grabbed some violet matter from an EMC link here, which we're going to feed into the other input, and we start working on the bees. We grab a bunch of high fertility bees. In this case, I believe I used marshy bees, but it doesn't matter. You just want high fertility, and you're going to set up some gene pools to get started. Okay, and right behind this guy, we're going to drop down 2 incubators because we're going to make bacteria and then enzyme. So we set up a crafter for the growth medium. We just use an interface to get that bone meal in that we were getting just a second ago. And we set up an EMC link here to get the sugar into it. Very basic. So you're going to need to prime this system, which I'll show in just a moment, but first you'll feed in this growth medium to your first ones. They'll feed directly in the second 2. The second 2 are also going to need additional sugar to actually make what's considered the enzyme. We set up our pipe ahead of time just to get it prepped for just a moment later. And we prime the system through an incubator with our own water and stuff to make the growth medium, since that's kind of recursive to itself. Get our enzyme started. And that's pretty much all we needed for that system. Make sure our bees are going to the gene pool. They are, and this needs ethanol as well to get working. We set up a basic smelter setup with melters from Cyclic. They need lava underneath, don't forget. Fractionating distill the biomass that's melted down into ethanol, and that starts converting our bees into liquid DNA. Feed that into our main system, and we are now making cosmic matter, of which we can go out and set the tank up on all of the miners with it. Okay, and with those and all of the other liquids done, we're actually able to put all the ender tanks on the miners and get everything operational. This next little bit that I'm going to go through is going to be quite fast, so you can look at me just set up our basic storage system here, and we've got a lot that I'm going to do very quickly throughout you guys here. So what we're going to look for is the Mythic Assembler, because we want to make this guy, the Purity Offer. He's going to be used for the Orchid and such later, and his recipe is pretty simple, but we do need the Mythic Assembler set up. And then when we take a look here at the Mythic Assembler crafting stuff, we really only need the spatial pylons. I decided just to go to Sedna to get the spatial pylons instead of craft them all. It was pretty easy. You just go and find them in batches of 2 in little star shape, and we get to construct our Mythic Assembler. This guy came out pretty nicely, and we'll immediately start working on getting some of the other resources and stuff we need together. Like this, we just smelt up a bunch of Terra Steel to throw into a tank. And so after the Terra Steel melts, like I said, you throw it on into a molten tank, and we work on collecting some other ingredients. We get the Ebb of Death from Bewitchment, which is a pretty simple craft, and we make the Evil Insight, which you already had everything for in an Astral Altar. The Evil Insight does warn that it's dangerous, so I wouldn't activate it near your base because it spawns in, which is whenever you use it, and gives you what's called Malum. The Malum can craft with the Claws Ray to give you Dynthos, which also warns about being very dangerous, so you do not want it to be near your base. Do not click these in your base. The Dynthos, every activation will give you Pure Warp, and it's also going to spawn in a bunch of Chagas. Just like that. I clicked this many times to get all of the Warp Stone. I do believe you need 32 of it. And it's a pretty simple craft after that as one of the ingredients. Here it is, we just crafted up. Nice and simple, that's our 4 warp stone that we needed. We throw in the fluids into the assembler, both our Terra Steel and Short Mead, which was pretty simple to get through. Super basic forestry stuff. Throw in all of our raw ingredients, which we already had everything collected for. Takes just a second and the craft gets started. The craft is quite a long one, so you do want to do something else during this time. So I looked forward and saw that for the Ragnarok Sigil, which we'll get after putting it down next to the Pure Daisy, you need to mix it with the crystals seen at the temple. The temple being this one in the Abyssal Wastelands. We grab our Purity Offer, we put this guy down, we give it a minute or so for the Pure Daisy to operate, and we get our Ragnarok Sigil. We mix it with the 4 crystal types and get our Azir Tribute. This Azir Tribute we just take on up to our 2nd floor with all of our beautiful magic stuff and throw it on in, and there we go. We finally acquired our Orchid. Nice little bit of progression here. We convert that Orchid to floating, we put it above our fabulous mana pool that produces infinite mana, and we set up 2 simple Arv Tools builders, one that will place stone constantly, and the other one that will mine anything that is not stone. And there we go. That cycles out the automation of all of the Orchid stuff and information. By the way, you can tick accelerate the Orchid and other similar plants. So we throw a Torturino on it and do quite a lot there to get our first bits of Arkenstone, and we can start our Arkenstone processing. Arkenstone processing needs industrial grinders, and I realize actually you can put multiple of these on one assembled multi-black, up to 4 per one. So I say that I can make a 6 set like this inside of the compact machine, which has all the fluids that these guys will need. They use the miner fluids from the tier like 1 miners or so for each one of the grinders, so you do need some kind of access to them, and doing them in the same cube that the fluids are provided in saves us on a lot of additional like ender tanks and such. So we use Phantom Faces to do some janky stuff. Make sure you send your extra stuff out the bottom to go back into your system, and we send the next bit of processing over to the right side for that industrial grinder set. This is pretty basic processing. Most of it ends up with some level of byproduct. Some of our byproducts are even actually going to be like Sedonite dust outright, which is very nice. This is just another form of getting automated Sedonite in our system without having to use our plasmatic condenser constantly for it. And there's an additional Sedonite processing line too that you can branch off of this after you finish up all the grinders like I did just there. Make sure everything does actually have a way to go though, and you can start up a melter to make your evanescent Bifrost. The evanescent Bifrost can go into a fluid infuser, which is then going to lead into a rock crusher, which is kind of interesting, and then back into a pressurizer. So these guys are all a fairly simple setup. You're going to feed the Sedonite dust into the fluid infuser with evanescent byproduct. You are then going to send the result from that into the rock crusher, which will make some form of evanescent Sedonite, and then that guy can be pressurized on over into a bunch of additional Sedonite. We convert one of the Arkenstones into the Orchid Ignum, which is just the nether version of this. It has to be in the nether for this to operate, by the way, and I have a band of mana on me that this will automatically take from. We tick accelerate it and break through everything until we're able to get its one result that we actually care about, which is called Ethereum Ore. We just stacked this guy up and it was pretty simple. And with that, we finish up all of our Arkenstone processing, and we can finally continue on in the quest book without missing out on too many of the resources that we're going to need here. I do start looking at the Pixonia artifact stuff, and it's still a bit forward. We're looking at it. The recipe's not too bad though, so I'm getting pretty hopeful here that we can get this done nice and quick. So we start working on everything else. We do need the wildwood core. It's the next step of the quest line. Everything here actually looks fairly easy. We sit here and we make ourselves some shadowium ingots, which is just always a fun one to say. I'm a big fan. And we acquire all of the wildwood ingredients needed. I do realize that we're going to need some biome placements that take the Stormlands biome, which has to be done through a specific bewitchment ritual so that we can get this kind of specific choline scythe bovine thing. Very weird. Kind of a pain, but it's not too bad. We get the Mithrilium Resonator and such. We already have crafting recipes for all that. Need some mummy hearts. It's going to need an impetus mirror and some other celestial crystals. All pretty easy. Here we go. We're setting up our hearts, getting our tar hearts into the mummified ones. We make our mummy hearts. You guys have already seen me do this before. Thankfully, we have that bee, so we just make the Armara, no problem. We craft the impetus jewels manually. Once again, I need a thaumatorium for that. We request ourselves our impetus mirrors. We set up the recipes needed for the Mithrilium Resonator, which we actually didn't have encoded yet at the time. And with all of that, we're able to make the bow line, which is the Stormland variant. This guy needs to be done in the Rite of Shifting Seasons from Bewitchment, which is just a triple purple circle on the floor, some very basic and accessible ingredients. You activate it, you wait a little while, it doesn't feel like it did anything, but then you realize it did actually change the biome, and it's also going to once again affect that big tree, and we're able to do our craft for the wildwood core here. So pretty simple overall, pretty nice. Also, this core is EMCable, so you only have to make it this way one time, at least for me, since I'm not doing a psychopath run. And there we go, wildwood core, another step ticked off the quest lines. Our next step in the quest line is vibranium servos, which all we're missing is the vibranium alloy ingots. We do look at these, and they're going to need hot vibranium alloy ingots in a vacuum freezer, and we can make the hot ones through a dragonfire crucible for now. So we set up the vacuum freezer. It's a pretty simple machine, reinforced machine casing, advanced machine casing, etc. Throw it on top, nice and simple. We just hook this guy on into the system. We start making a bunch of the dragon steels manually through our infusion setup, since we can do them cheaper that way now, and we throw in everything needed to make a pretty big batch of the vibranium alloy ingots. At least they're hot variants. They craft in batches of 12, which is pretty easy here. Throw them onto the vacuum freezer. It's pretty fast with 4 overclockers, and we're already able to make the vibranium servos. That next little step in our questline here was quite easy, and thankfully they craft quite quickly as well. We start looking at the next component in the questline, and we see that it's the Mythic machine casing. I do notice a Mermex thing here for Cursed Mermatite, which looked really easy, so I do that real quick, even though it's not quite immediately usable. It's just Mermatite ingots, give you this Mermatite catalyst. I finally make that thaumatorium I kept talking about. You feed it some Vidium, and we're able to craft 100 buckets of the Cursed Mermatite. This guy won't really do anything, but he'll make 400 Mermatite coolant cells later, which we can use for the more efficient Mythic casing recipe. But we can't use that recipe yet. We actually have to use the basic one first, which I will realize in just a moment. And that's the recipe at the bottom. We do look at super translucent crystals, which are going to need mistite ingots. And so I decide that we're going to start doing a bunch of chickens in between my bits of crafting recipes here. So here's our Candite chicken going through. Chickens are easy. You just throw them on. You grow a couple more of them. You breed them together until you get a 10-10-10, just like how agrocraft seeds used to work, if anyone remembers messing with those in a lot of packs. Very fun. I guess actually we messed with them in this pack too, thinking about it. My bad, it's been a little bit since I've played compared to the recording here. We set up a lot of chickens, we do a bunch of basic chicken induction crafting, although we do all that manually, because I'm a psychopath and I don't set up the automation for this later. But we get effectively a chicken wall, and I realize I need the Baphomet altar to actually make the advanced circuitry needed for the enhanced recipe. So we set a basic recipe, we handcraft another stack or so of the Lionite plates, and we're able to order our first little batch of Mythic machine casings. We order 6 of them, and they craft through just fine. Absolutely beautiful, and I decide here for some reason to get completely derailed, and I look at Pixonia, I'm like, we can continue. It needs some attuned crystals to make the Abyssite crystal recipe for it that we didn't have already, so I craft that together. Go and attune them all. We're able to make our 2 Abyssite crystals, and that was pretty much the only missing component to actually get the Pixonia stuff needed. Everything else we'd already had set up. So we do our basic little infusion guy, and here we are. We're getting our Pixonia artifact. Don't forget to right click this artifact, otherwise you will not actually unlock the dimension and a bunch of wonky stuff can happen. So right click it in your hand, put it in your warp controller, and you can head on over. I know we've gone quite fast here, so we can slow down just a little bit for Pixonia, although it is pretty easy to get through here. We land, we get attacked by some of those Stymphalian birds. We find this structure, we spawn in this Dread Servant. He has the Icy Dreadful Shard in his hand, which is going to be needed for some stuff later. Pretty simple. We find this thing with compressed cobblestone and 4 different sapling types next to some animated computers. I swapped this pressure plate out for a wooden button so I can shoot it from range because I figured it was going to spawn enemies on me directly at this structure. I figured extremely correctly. It spawned in a bunch of wasps. These wasps actually dropped the adamantium stinger though, although I couldn't get the scene from the actual last hit. Find a structure of spiders, spawns in a bunch of these skeletons, and the spider spawners are also going ham the whole time. As we're throwing everything away here in the system, that's who we got our Whispering Meatball from. Find another chest. He has the Gem of Gluttony spawned in a thing. I didn't even touch it. And then we find an Aerico around a funny tree. Inside of this funny tree is some of the Ogreite ore, and this is how you actually get your initial Ogreite. We have our Fortune pickaxe out, so that gave us quite a bit. And we find another little boss spawn here. This guy has the robotic control unit, the anomaly detector whispering, which will be needed later. And we find another structure here, which we cheese to get our Pixonia infusion key. Here is what's considered a hard boss fight, and I make a slight mistake in this fight. We spawn in everything, it spawns in an absolute ton of stuff and bedrocks off the front wall, and so I float above everything to kill them all. I see the avatar of the Meatball Man, I'm like, how much damage does he do? He one-shots my whole armor with Unbreaking 260, which was kind of unexpected. I really didn't think this was going to happen. I really considered my options here in not doing that. But I did it anyways, and I didn't expect him to insta-one-tap literally all of my armor. As you can tell, I was very surprised. It was also quite amusing at the time. Unfortunately, there goes my night vision for quite a while, because I'm lazy and I don't remake it. We kill that guy, and he gives us the recursive meatball, and that is most of what we need from Pixonia, so we head on back to the overworld here. Moving back into the overworld, we start working on the Baphomet altar again, which needs whitewashed bricks. We actually remembered that these come from a building in Lalicia. I remembered seeing them, so I got them that way instead of crafting them. We're able to craft the Baphomet altar bricks, we craft this little statue, we craft the altar core, and we assemble this guy using a beautiful assembly stick. We give him a simple interface with the pattern in it. The recipe itself was not difficult. We just needed the multi-block for it. We're able to craft 16 of these guys, so we finally have all the resources together for that component that we were missing. We need our Myrmex coolant cells, so we decide to set up some basic crafting for all of the helium cells, which we already have passived, just to tier themselves up automatically. Feed those guys into a fluid infuser. We set up some Myrmidite buckets that we made earlier going into a fluid transposer, which automatically empties them into the infuser. Instead of doing any kind of stuff on that, we just kind of passive the system, and that gives us back to the recipe to make the 8 machine casings at one time instead of 2. The much more efficient recipe here, which is very nice. We're able to do a full batch craft of 100 of these guys, which is absolutely wonderful. Just goes to show how much we've progressed, and we move on into a compact machine to get started on setting up the Mythic processors that we decided we wanted. So we tag all these guys with just some basic blueprints in our bookmarks, start trying to make the electromagnets, and realize we're missing an okay amount of resources. These missing items are all pretty easy here. We just encode the emerald plates as a crafting recipe. We set up a recipe for the magnetic monopoles, which is going to need some wildwood stuff, so we do set up a wildwood mage automatically in one of our factory controller hearts, which goes, and we're able to automatically craft 128 of these electromagnets, so we can finally get started. I also do set up a Dramacrix for corrupted shards, which we will need later, but we won't need them immediately. We start up by setting our first machine down, which is going to be a beautiful alloy furnace. This guy is going to handle a lot of our alloyed recipes super quick and at a pretty high ratio. We decide to set up 2 pulverizers so that we can have a tier 1 and tier 2 for slightly different purposes. We go through and we set up our normal furnace as well. This guy's needed for some of the specific recipes. We set up a wire mill because you can never go wrong with having a wire mill, and we set up a purifier too, which automates some of the basic stuff that we would normally do through the AE system, which is very nice. Give all these guys interfaces and power, hook them all in, and we start encoding the recipes and looking at what we can do next. So this next guy is our warper plane, and we actually have everything to make this next warper for a Pishi. Super, super easy, and I totally said that wrong. We warp on over to a Pishi. We're underneath the ground for some reason, extremely far underneath the ground. We build up, break out, and we're cruising around. There's bees. We find like a salty queen. We find a dreaming queen. We find this other one too, which is an auric queen, and right as we get attacked, it surprised me. We find this one, which is a timely queen. So it's effectively a bunch of bee breeding that can avoid stuff. This little room worries that it's a hard fight, that it's a boss fight. I decided to cheese this one with interdiction torches. It reflects both enemies and projectiles from enemies. So it is effectively invulnerability as long as their projectile is so fast it ignores it. So we're just sitting here in the corner, and we slowly chip away at everything. We kill them all and we get the heart of the elder one, and then I accidentally spawn it all in again, which was pretty funny for me, but you guys don't need to see that. We go around and we find this temple building, which I was looking around for quite a while to find the Torturino, and this guy was thankfully the one that had it. He has the improved Torturino, which is effectively compressed. That guy's a 27x, and that finishes everything that we needed actively from that warper plane, so we're going back to working on some other machines. We do see the arc reactor here that we're going to need for some recipes later, so we start getting everything together to craft him, which isn't too bad, and go back to make a Mythic processor compactor since the craft for that had finished. And we're able to use him actually to make some of the components needed for the arc reactors. These guys aren't too bad since we have all the processors going, all the recipes are pretty easy to put in, and I decided to make 4. These guys are making about 4 million RF a tick, but what's most important is they produce 1 arc residue each per minute, which is beautiful. We need that for crafting recipes very soon and to get some stuff towards our salt reactor going once again. We start encoding all the recipes for our salt reactor in, and we realize some of the missing components like arc coils need to be automated. This one's going to need some blocks of terra steel as well, a lot of them, selenite rods, basic things like packed ice and magma blocks and all of that sort of stuff, exoskeletons, lots of EMC materials, so it's not too bad. Crystalline components needed to get a slightly higher buffer. We had to set up the lathe that we already had to work properly with the system automatically, and we scrolled down and realized we were missing even more ingredients. And to get started on those resources, we set up a Dragonfire Crucible into the ME system to get our finer uranium going. We look at the Infusionator to get all of our gleaming stones and other similar things. We set that guy up on the 3rd floor, give him ME access too, and encode all the recipes into him that he's going to need for the infusion stones. We set up a rolling machine. This guy will actually cover the recipe needed for the arc coil automatically, so we don't have to do any handcrafted jank with that. Make a gravitite enchanter that has ME access for a couple of our other things, and set up a crafter for infused mermatite and the boosters that we'll need later. We set up a few other recipes. We finally put down the induction smelters to automate the eggs from our special chickens into their ingot forms, so I don't have to keep doing that manually in large batches. It was getting annoying. We set up a crafter to turn terra steel crystals into just normal terra steel and look immediately into getting our bismuth clusters. We need a Mythmanite scythe, so we go through all of the infusions for this. It takes just a little while, but it's not that big of a deal. And I actually do realize here after I make this first one that I do need a second one, which I can upgrade to a vibrating Mythmanite scythe to do automated ichor production later. Once again, not too hard. You just do a little bit of combination crafting here and an infusion after, and now we have both sides done. That guy can get put to the side though. Our bismuth clusters need the Mythmanite scythe. They need some basic automation with smelteries to get our native copper clusters going through Thaumatorium, and we feed it Fabrico crystals from the system into the crafter, and there we go. Bismuth clusters fully passived. We also set up a basic passive for impetus jewels here just because we need it. Moving on to stuff for the MSR, we need Eutetic NAC, so we set up some basic machines for electrolyzing to get the sodium and potassium we need, which you can salt mix into the Eutetic NAC alloy, and we can move on to getting our basic MSR mat down on what we need for the Pixonia. We're going to need what's called Pixonia. So they have a beautiful thing in the JEI for this. This is considered one slice. So a slice of an MSR is essentially one lengthwise bit of the exact number of coolers versus vessels that you need and exactly what they're filled with to guarantee that your heat production stays at a negative value and you're being as efficient as you can in your coolant to processing speeds. So this guy's a slice. I figure we probably want 3 or 4 slices. These are going to be vessels, and the rest of them are going to be what's called coolers. It's not too difficult. They're pretty easy to set up once you know what you're doing. So I'd say if we want 4 slices, we're going to need 8 vessels. I love that we can craft that. So we're going to need a total of 11 coolers per slice, so we need 44 coolant heaters. All we're missing for this is advanced control steel stores, which is actually from the infusionator crafts needing for like gleaming infusion stones. So we set that up through the thaumatorium nice and manually before we start taking a look at also getting our 44 guys together, which we can finally craft, and our 26 vents, which we need one on both the entrance and the output of every slot. We do realize that we're actually going to need the stuff to set up Vital Lymph, which I kind of forgot about, which takes Molten Ogerite, which we have, but Fine Mineral Dust, which we don't have. This is a combination of 26 different dust after I counted them from bookmarking them. So we go into a convect machine and start setting these guys up. I'm not going over every dust. There's a ridiculous amount of them here. You can just find through all of their methods in the IME system. Like it wasn't too bad, honestly. We had a lot of the ore and stuff for these in a prerequisite already. I do start looking at the actual crafting recipe, and it has 3 different recipe packages, which means we're going to use 3 smaller packagers to do this specifically. We tell these guys to fit to first match, and we feed them all exactly the components to make 1 minor recipe craft. These will make 3 different packages, 1 from each one, and those 3 packages can go into an unpackager to unpackage fully into the fine mineral dust, since if you try to pipe into the ultimate package crafter manually, it will get stuck all the time and is an absolute menace. The Discord has a really good guide on that, and we finally build up a new floor to actually build the MSR. This guy, we just have to build out the frame. Don't worry about it too much, just build it to whatever your dimensions are. And I'll let the at the time me take over here for this basic explanation. The most core concept of this guy is follow the guide. Super, super simple. It's pretty easy. We know that our 2 fission vessels are going to be in the center, and all of the other blocks on the outside edges are going to be coolers. So, let us grab ourselves some coolant heaters. We know that there's not one here, so we'll put a filler block here for now. Not one here. Break this guy out because he needs to be a fission vessel. Molten salt fission vessel. Alright, and now these guys are going to be pretty simple. We're going to make this our input side. Input side needs to be on default. Pretty easy, right? These guys are fission vessels, which means that we need fuel spread, because that will spread both the depleted fuel and the new fuel that it needs over into this container. These are going to be our coolants. Hot coolant out will only be at the end, so we're going to put these all on coolant spread too. Spread for the inside of the reactor, and then you're going to do the output one on just the very last one in the chain. These guys are pretty easy to manage because all you need to do now is grab your fission vessels and grab your coolant heaters, and if you shift right click on, it will add on with the exact same attributes as the other one. Same with all of the coolant heaters. And there we go. Simple as that. We just swap all of these guys over. Make sure you don't shift click these trying to like skip 2 at one time. It doesn't work that way. You'll change the one behind it. If that happens, you'll be in for a horrible time if you don't realize. And there you go. These will be our 2 Pixonia outputs, and these will all be our different hot coolants. You could send the hot coolants directly into a heat exchanger. There is a whole thing in the Discord if you want to see like how to compare your heat exchanger sizes and check its stuff based on its fueling efficiency rate and everything. But I'm probably just gonna trash it. I think we're just gonna flue trash can it. But yeah, and this is it. You just put vents on now onto all of these. Vents do not do any kind of auto input or output. So any kind of vents that you put on these will need to be directly managed and filtered on the external face. But then you fill in with your walls. And somewhere on this face, you do have to put the reactor controller. We'll put on this side because it's towards the center, and we'll put on the right side just because. And there we go. That's an assembled salt reactor. It's got 8 fission vessels and 44 coolers. And with that, we also set the input and output sides with signs just to make sure we don't mess it up later. We void all of the hot coolant outputs, and we set up the Pixonia output to go into a barrel just to stack it all up. We set up basic fluid input filters on every input. On this side, they do need to be into their specific spots as according to the grid that you see in the JEI, because otherwise it will not work correctly. You will have a reactor meltdown. On the top of the reactor, we set up the basic things to change out the different types of knack that we're going to need. These guys are super simple mixing jobs, and we also set up the ogrite to melt down, and then fluid enrich with the fine mineral dust to make the molten vital lymph that we require to actually fuel the reactor. We see it's all online, we throw on the lever, we start him up, and he's operating. We give that just a second to run through, and we're getting our fluid lymph of Pixonia. Nice and filling up the drum. This is perfect, this is exactly what we needed, and it's going to be used for a couple of other crafting recipes. We pump him into an ender tank just to have that available. And we feed that ender tank directly into this guy, a fluid infuser. This guy is actually going to make some ethereal stones. We code this into the interface, and that guy's needed for the universal boosters to be made, which then also are used to make the ogrite ore. With the universal boosters being done from those infusion stones being accessible by having the lymph of Pixonia, we can order more ogrite ore, we can break all that ore down and fill it out. Our knack production was a little slow, so we added more salt mixers instead of just the 1. We moved it up to 7. We fill in more ogrite to get some more lymph of Pixonia going, and we take a quick look at the Mythic excavation engines and realize they need high strength transmission coils, and they also need some demons, blood will stuff. So we just make a little setup here for that guy. We're going to feed him the blood infused ingots, and then he will just automatically produce our demon will. That's just a passive process now. Looking at the high strength transmission, we need this gearbox, which has a ton of different gear types. Thankfully, that's not too hard. And we also need this rod, which is going to need some like arrow shafts and such to be passived or somehow manually automatable. We go and we set up some other machines. This one's a gear working Mythic machine, a Mythic processor to go through. We encode all of the gears, and that actually lets us encode the gearboxes immediately. So this made it super simple since we had the processor on this. We didn't have to do this in any weird way. Can on-demand it pretty quick too. Good enough for me. And that is pretty much what we are going to end the day up on, because we're looking at the rest of the stuff for the high-strength transmission coils here, and we don't quite have everything set up for it. This was actually the end of the stream as well. Figured I was going to get off here. So that is going to be the end of episode number 17. Thank you guys so much for watching this series, and I do have some unfortunate news about it that I'll give here, and I'll also be doing a separate video on this in just a little bit, that this series is going to be coming to an end soon, because I've actually lost the world files, so I can't continue the series. The server computer that I was running the world on has broken down, so the series unfortunately will come to an end. I do have a few more episodes of content that I could put out. I'm not sure if we're going to do that yet, and we're probably also going to steer into doing other mod packs. I doubt I'm going to restart this one for now, and I'll let it change a bit more before I try to get back into it. Thank you guys so much though for all the support on this series so far, and I hope you guys have just as much support for any series that I come up with in the future. I may be doing slightly shorter and more accessible mod packs for the general population though. Thank you once again so much. Have a wonderful day.